right, everyone. Welcome back to the Journalist Emeritus Foundation's Media and Journalism webinars. Good afternoon, good evening from wherever you're joining us today for this wonderful session. This is our third meeting, and today we will be discussing reporting from conflict and war zones. We have notable speakers with us: Thomas Siders from Greece, an award-winning documentary producer, investigative journalist, covering critical regional crises in his movies, films, and documentaries. And dear Isabel Koshev, the correspondent of The Guardian, reporting from Ukraine, I believe since the beginning of the war. She's over there. Let's just share some reminders. That would be great to keep ourselves muted unless we have the floor to make an intervention, ask a question, share a comment, feedback, or anything that you would like to share. And that would be great if we can have our cameras on too, if possible, as these are recording sessions, and it's always good to see you on board. Please do not wait till the last minute to post your questions, comments. As you very well know, by the third session today, Yazid is keeping the discussion very active, and it's even better with your comments and questions involved along the program. And I will be sharing the social media tags of our speakers, both in Twitter and Instagram. Please tag us in your tweets, in your posts, so that we can also follow you and stay in touch. So Yazid, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chemri, for the introduction. And just a reminder to our participants, so we have now reached the halfway mark. We have already completed 2 webinars. This is the third one, and next week we have the last 2. I definitely want to encourage you to please take full advantage of having time with people who are working in the field. We understand, of course, some of our participants are already working as journalists or starting out their careers. Some of them have just graduated, and others are still finding a path. So participants, please do feel free to ask questions, take advantage of the opportunity to get the advice from people who are out there doing the work that you aspire to do. So let's get straight to our guests. Let's welcome Isabel and Thomas. Isabel, can you maybe just share with our participants, of course, a little bit about yourself and where you are at the moment? Sorry, we got a brief introduction from Chemri, but let's hear about Isabel from her. Isabel, yeah, so over to you.
Thanks again for inviting me. Yeah, I guess I can start, given the sort of nature of our discussion, with how I started out. So I'm half Ukrainian. I came to Ukraine just like a few months after the revolution in 2014. I was working for like an English language newspaper for a while, and then I was doing freelancing and kind of got into investigative stuff, and I did that for several years. And sort of in between the investigative stuff, I did fixing for different media outlets. And through that fixing, essentially, when the war started here, I was working as a fixer, and I was doing my own research project separate to that, and then I got hired for the Guardian position because I kind of built up a lot of experience doing things in Ukraine and around this region. And also, you know, there's always the luck factor. There aren't very many positions, as we all know, and you know, a lot of journalists had left Kiev at the time, and I was still there along with other people. But yeah, a lot of news organizations were really looking for people to fill those spots at that time. So it was a luck factor as well. But yeah, so that's kind of, I hope that helps kind of sum it up for people.
Absolutely. So for the benefit of participants, can you please just tell us what is fixing?
Sure. So fixing is where you work for like a correspondent or maybe a team of correspondents who maybe aren't familiar with the country or speak the language, and you can help them with translation, transcriptions, finding contacts, ringing people, organizing things. It's kind of it really depends on what you're doing, but it can range from being quite like an assistant to being a sort of journalist on the team, but maybe not an in-house journalist. Fixing has a lot of problems. The fact that fixing exists is problematic in my opinion, because basically instead of hiring people who are from that country, know that country, people send in their own people. And that's for structural regions. They already have staff members that they're paying. So they're going to send them instead of hiring new people who they don't know or whatever. But I think that, they're like, I've had some really good experiences. I've been credited for most of the fixing work that I've done. But a lot of fixes aren't credited. And in Ukraine, we had a case at the beginning of the invasion where one journalist was killed, and Fox News, she was working as a fixer for Fox News, and they didn't credit her in so there was two Fox, there was she was killed and another Fox correspondent, and they didn't include her in the announcement, the original announcement. And so it kind of, and they had their excuses for that after that, but it kind of shows that they didn't really consider, even though she'd been working for them for a while before the invasion, and she was working with them full time, they didn't consider her, and she was a fully qualified journalist, they didn't consider her a real member of their team because she was a local journalist, if that makes sense. So I think it can really range. I have had good experiences, but some people can feel ignored or marginalized by the experience, but it does give you contacts, and it can be well paid. So that's another benefit.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you so much. Is anybody's microphone giving feedback? Because I don't know if anybody can hear. Okay, that sounds gone. Okay, so let's go to our other guest, Thomas. Yeah, please tell us a bit about yourself as well.
Repeat, please.
Hello, Thomas. Can
Hello.
you please? Yes, hi. We'd like to know a bit more about you as well for our participants. Please tell us a bit more about your work and what you are doing in relation to our topic. Thank you.
I'm working at Public Broadcast Corporation, ERT, based in Athens. I'm filming, I make documentaries about based on human rights, especially, but I have directed 2 or 3 historical films, documentaries. I was in Syria the period between 2010 to 2014, and I recorded the refugee flows from Syria to Turkey and the ways for Europe. And the period after 2018, I was in Armenia and Azerbaijan, and I filmed the conflict between Armenians and Azerians, and especially after 2020, the treaty in autumn 2020.
Okay, so film is your language, film is your medium. You are using film to tell stories, Thomas, just to, yes. That's what you are. Mm-hmm. And documentary film specifically.
Yes. The filming and the documentaries to tell the same things, who reporting Isobel in The Guardian or in a TV channel, but the filming, the documentary is a different kind, because I'm working on my topic for many years. For example, the Syrian refugees The Muddy River of Basim. It's the documentary about Syrian Kurdish refugees. I worked on it for 10 years because I need documentation, because I follow my hero for a long time, for example, for to the long refugee trek. And for the documentary, I needed the documentation of my topic, and this is the most difficult because I need documents for my film. For example, I need historical videos, I need oral testimonies from old people. I need any kind of documents.
Mhm. So, Isabel and Thomas, just to share with you, our first two sessions focused on the practicalities and also the ethics of journalism. So, for example, our first session looked at freelance journalists and how they work, and because we understand that not everybody is going to work full time or maybe get a full time job immediately. And then our second session focused on organizations that was somehow playing a role with journalists to create stable societies. Now, today's topic links kind of to a question that our participants in our second session talked about. There was this conversation that we had about journalists only writing about the negative things happening in our society. And conflict, unfortunately, can be seen as quite a negative thing, because it seems that once there's conflict, it's in the news. And in fact, we are seeing maybe even less news about the Ukraine in quite a lot of the international media, because it seems when things go quiet, the media seems to forget about the people that they were reporting on. So I think I want to ask a question. Isabel, you are and have been covering one of the biggest conflicts happening in the news this year. Ukraine has been one of the biggest stories this year, if not possibly the biggest. If one had to look at searches online, what kind of news people have been searching for, let's say, over the last 6 months. So Isabel, why is it important to do this work? Why do you think you do this work, and why is it important for you?
I think that's a very good question. To be honest, if I didn't have a connection to this country, I don't know if I would do this job. And the reason for that is because it's incredibly difficult emotionally to see people who you relate to, because I speak the same language as them. They could be family members, like in this, I understand kind of plus minus what their lives are like, the culture, how people relate to each other. And so it's kind of like going to a funeral or a wake every day, but apart from you're like a kind of unwanted guest some of the time, and some of the time people welcome you and they want you to cover it, and some of the time they're just too upset, and it's just very difficult, but I would say the moment when I realized that the media attention was drifting, and it has, for the first 2 months, I think it was kind of top of the news quite widely. And now it's, maybe every few days something will be covered if there's a kind of major event. And that did initially kind of, I found that quite painful. But then I realized that actually, there are a lot of things going on in the world, and it's not right to say that one conflict, Ukraine's not the only conflict, one conflict should be prioritized or anything like that. And so I just realized that, okay, well, that's just what happens, and the media cycle moves on. But I think, there has been some awareness over the last maybe 5 or 6 years of continuing to cover, not completely phasing one conflict out for another and continuing to keep some sort of tab on different things going on. I can't talk about what's happening in other conflicts so much, but I know that it does seem that they want to keep some tabs on what's happening here. Again, that could be like a kind of a bias on the fact that, you know, with The Guardian, at least it's a, you know, European publication and the conflict is happening in Europe, which again would be wrong. So I'd be interested to hear people's thoughts on that. But yeah, I'm not sure if that answers the question.
Yeah, I think definitely from the personal side, we definitely get a bit of the answer there. And then also, I think I'd like to understand professionally as a journalist. You know, you mentioned that it's the Guardians in Europe, and of course we hear from people in Europe, you know, gas prices, the impact that they feel because, you know, for example, I'm hearing stuff about people applying for visas to go to Europe, and then they're saying there's a lot of visa processing being done, or a lot of embassies or people are busy with helping Ukrainians, you know. Mm-hmm. So I guess there's that broader impact. I think what I'd like to hear from you as well is professionally and journalistically also why conflict reporting, you know? I mean, you could write about anything else, you know, like, I mean, I understand that, you know, there are many fields of journalism. People can write about health, education, you know, conflict journalism. What is it about? Is it just because you happened to be Ukrainian and this is a big story? Is there, or did you consciously choose to cover the story? And I mean, it's a risk as well, right? So I guess I want to hear from the professional side as well. Why conflict journalism? Why conflict reporting? Or is it just because you happen to be there?
So just on your first point about the visas and stuff, obviously that's very wrong and that shouldn't be happening. And I don't know what we can do to kind of adjust that balance, because of course Ukrainians are victims, but other people at other places are too. On your second point, yeah, I would say that as a professional, so I'm terrified of everything, terrified of crossing the road. So the idea that I would be in a situation where I had artillery falling near me or like rockets and stuff is just, I couldn't have imagined that a year ago. But essentially I decided to stay at the beginning because I thought that Ukraine was going to fall. I thought that Ukraine was going to be captured by Russia and I wanted to witness it. So I suppose that was kind of a professional decision. I wanted to record that. I was completely wrong. That didn't happen. And I think, you know, I think I thought negatively to almost kind of emotionally protect myself from what might happen. But basically, yeah, I think I just decided that I've got to stay to kind of put the work in and help explain what's going on, because it is very, very complicated. And a lot of people, they see Russians and Ukrainians and they say, well, like you look the same, like Ukrainians are like, all Ukrainians speak Russian and Ukrainian basically. Like, so what's the deal, you know? And so I think, like, for me, I kind of knew that I could help explaining that, so I wanted to stay for that reason. But yeah, and also to witness it, and to help sort of try and give like I mean, obviously I'm not full Ukrainian, so I don't want to sort of own this too much, but like, you know, give a kind of when you can understand someone in their own language and translate it really, really well. I find that's a very effective tool, like to really tell people in other countries that, like, make people relatable to each other, because people are, you know, people are the same essentially, like on so many levels. And you know, if you can describe somebody, okay, they were trying to do this normal thing that anybody else would do, and then this happened to them, and it makes people imagine what that would themselves in that situation. And I think that kind of is a very powerful thing.
I love that. I love that journalists or journalism helping people to relate to each other. I really like that comment. And I think that's essentially what we try to do as journalists as well. We are essentially reflecting a human experience, and this experience could be happening in any part of the world. And this is how people in Ukraine are dealing with it at the moment. So, Thomas, thank you, Isabel. So, Thomas, you are focusing on human rights, you said, in documentary film. So what drew you to focus on human rights? Like I was asking Isabel as well, like you could choose, maybe you could have chosen a topic that was a bit more, maybe less stressful. I don't know, why human rights?
Yes, the human rights is a general meaning, has a general meaning, but for example, in the case of human rights of migrants, I have to say that migrants of Middle East, from Syria, from Nigeria, from Afghanistan, all of these migrants have a different welcome in my country or in Europe from, for example, other refugees, in this case from Ukrainian refugees. I was in Strasbourg in European Court of Human Rights 3 or 4 weeks ago, and when I was arrived at Strasbourg, I saw a very big desk and a label in which you can see Ukrainian refugees, welcome to Strasbourg, welcome to Europe. But I never see it in my country, in European countries, Syrian migrants welcome in Europe, or Afghanistan migrants welcome in Europe. I understand very, very well, because I live in a European country, that this war, the war in Ukraine, after invasion Russia in Ukraine, it happens in the heart of Europe, is a very big conflict during the last years. But for me, refugees are refugees. Refugees from Ukraine are the same, refugees from Syria, refugees from Afghanistan. For me, all refugees are human beings. And in my documentary, I faced all of these people as human beings. For example, I was in Nagorno-Karabakh for a period 3 or 4 years, and if you see my documentary in Nagorno-Karabakh, the war between Armenians and Azerians is the same. You can, under of the helmets of soldiers, you can see the same empty, the same eyes, the same mouths, the same empty views. I think that as a filmmaker, I cannot have a different position in my films. I support, as a human and as a director, the human rights, all of human beings.
Thank you for that. Let's get now into the practicalities of the work that you do as people who have taken on work in and around conflict situations. Oh, that was a nice sound. Let's look at the practicalities of the work that you do. How does one, or how would you advise someone to prepare for this kind of work? Also, of course, we do keep in mind that, our participants, somebody might be sitting in a country with a conflict, we've got participants from different parts of the world right now on this call. Isabel, how did you, were you prepared for this kind of work, conflict reporting? What can you say about being prepared to report on a conflict? How would you go about it?
No, so I wasn't really prepared. I'd had some training in the past, like you can do this sort of heat training with a past employer. But that was many years ago, and it didn't really relate much to what was happening. I'd say in the first few days of in the first maybe month of the war, it was really dangerous because nobody knew what was going on, and the reports of what was happening wasn't really keeping up in real time. So you didn't necessarily know where you were going was safe, and you didn't know what was happening in a certain area. I'd say now you pretty much know. Of course, it can still be random, but you pretty much know if you're heading to the front lines, there's a risk of artillery or an increased risk of rockets. In certain towns, there's increased risks of rockets landing. But apart from that, it's just completely random, or maybe it's not, but you're not going to know where it's going to land and why. So I think in terms of the practicalities, definitely first aid, I think is really, really key. But also psychologically, I think, reading, talking to people, understanding what it's going to be like to hear and see things. And like I do think learning about certain types of weapons and stuff is really helpful. And because I always thought, if you wear body armor then you're protected. No, like it can protect you from shrapnel, but that's and maybe a bullet, but that's about it. If you get hit by a rocket, that's it. So it's those kind of things. It's just learning about that and realizing it and trying to come to terms with if you're okay with that kind of level of risk. And you can also do things where you cover things further back from the front lines, and that's what we do a lot of the time at the Guardian. We don't go to the front lines. Sometimes you end up there unknowingly, but you don't necessarily. But you can go to a hospital, for instance, and interview somebody, and they can tell you the story. But I think it might be different for film. So I'd be interested to hear, what Thomas has to say.
Awesome. So yeah, Thomas, how do you prepare when you decide to make a film? And also, it's a longer term project, right? It maybe needs a bit more planning.
Yes, of course. The filming is very different from, for example, if I was correspondent in Ukraine or in Nagorno-Karabakh or in the conflict zone between Turkey and Syria, is absolutely different to prepare or to make a film. For example, for a filming, for a documentary, the first point is to make repérage. Repérage means I have to know the place, the space, the filming field. After that, you have to find and to prepare. To find people, they can. These people must trust you to explain the real situation in the conflict zone. In every war zone, the first victim is the information. I think Isabel, you agree with it. In conflict zones, journalists and directors, we have to clear what is truth and what is propaganda. In conflict zones, there are in war zones, we are different, many different centers of propaganda. You have to clear the testimony, the truth from propaganda. And the next step in my filming is the oral testimonies from oral testimonies from people, not soldiers or politicians or officers, army officers, but I'm interesting for people, for villagers, from citizens, from victims of the war, people who lost, or mothers who lost their children. I'm interested to learn the story from people, not from official information. The war correspondent is a different job, it's a different work. But in the film, you have to collect oral testimonies from people from conflict zone. It's very, 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 very difficult because these people lost their relatives, or they have lost their children. You have you faced people who lived the last months only with loss. For example, when I was in Syria, I saw a child about 3 or 4 years old, and every time when fly upon us an aeroplane, the child ran into his home. I answered why the child ran in his home, and his father told me that the child afraid the bombs because every day rain bombs in our region. The oral testimonies from the people who live the war, for me, it's the most important thing for my filming. And I'm finding human stories, interesting human stories about war. I'm trying to understand the conflict. I don't know, when I'm visiting the conflict zones, I'm trying to know nothing about it. All of my knowledge is in the conflict zone.
Mm-hmm. So would you say that it's a situation where you would then spend more time maybe doing your research, because you need to find also people that you can spend time with to tell this story? Because we understand, also from my own experience as a journalist, our time, our deadlines are different. We have to produce stories as journalists all the time. Do you then, how does your research process work? Do you spend months first doing research before you start filming?
Yes, before before I start the filming, I research only my topic. I have to visit the zone first. I need information about the conflict zone. I'm care for my safety and health for my crew and me, because I can't. It's very dangerous to put my crew or the director of photography, the cameraman in danger. I don't know. I don't want it. And I'm research the zone about 6-8 months before the first filming. I have to meet people, maybe army officers, to learn the story, to research the story behind the war, behind the dust of war, because in the war zones you have information, conflict information, and after that, with the translators, I'm trying to film the oral testimonies. But it's very, very difficult because you maybe the war zone in Nagorno-Karabakh, for example, we have villages in the war front line and villages in the back. And the people who live in the villages far from war front line, they have they can tell their stories to camera, but the citizens who live in villages in war front line, here all of them, they're preparing the exodus of their villages.
Mhm. I must say, I really like what both of our participants said today. What Isabel and Thomas were both talking about was their safety. And, I think that's a super important, aspect to think about when doing conflict reporting. Thomas, of course, said that, they make sure that the crew, that everyone is safe. Isabel also talked about, how understanding weapons, even understanding that a particular kind of protective gear is going to be needed. Isabel, would you agree that it's more important to stay alive than just, because people might have the impression that conflict reporting is like, you just run out there and just go all out being super gung-ho and brave and like, I want the story. Wouldn't you say it's more important to stay alive to tell the story than just chasing the story?
Yeah, absolutely. And I also think that, you can put other people in danger if you put yourself in danger. So for instance, if you go somewhere where, perhaps you shouldn't be, it's not safe to go and you're injured, and then someone might have to come and get you. And that person, might not be able to then leave whatever, they might get injured or killed trying to help you. So, and similarly, you could be taken to a hospital and resources could be used on you, which could be used on somebody in that country. So I think even just from a kind of purely like ethical point of view, I think you have a responsibility when you're in a country not to infringe. And and then from like what Thomas was saying about keeping other people safe, I think you do have a responsibility, because sometimes you can be with people, for instance, you hire a driver, and we're really lucky at The Guardian that we insure our drivers in the same way that we insure the correspondents, so they have the same medical insurance as we do, and we pay people well, for anything dangerous, and we choose people who are experienced, former soldiers or something along those lines. But even so, you can't, you have to bear in mind that you might be doing this for your kind of professional interest. Other people might be doing it for money, so you can't, that's like an ethical question in itself. So I think you have to be thinking like, well, these people might just think, well, this is a really good amount of money, so I'm going to take this job. But that doesn't mean that they should be put in danger. And I think the good thing about well, I like the kind of reporting that we do, and I think it sounds quite similar to Thomas's, but I've yet to watch some of his work, but is, you know, you don't have to, you can let people tell those stories. You don't necessarily have to actually hang around to see the violence firsthand. But I mean, there's different approaches to conflict reporting, but yeah, I think, like, you know, it's almost like going into those situations, you want to leave quickly because you don't want to end up another casualty of the war. And then another thing is, it can draw attention away from the people on the ground. If a journalist is hit, you know, everyone will flash like the news headline, a journalist injured, a journalist killed, and you know, there might have been several civilians injured or killed that day. So that's like another thing.
Okay, thank you, Isabel. Our participants are asking questions in the chat, so I'm going to go there. And in fact, I'm going to ask Nasser to unmute and ask his question. Nasser Anik from Bangladesh, you're asking a very important question in the chat. And I think, can you maybe unmute and ask the question to our guests?
Hi.
Nasser. Yes, hi, Nasser.
Hi.
Nasser, are you
Yes.
you're phoning us from Bangladesh? Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
I just want to know anywhere is harmful to humanity, and in this world, everywhere we have looked. Two parties are engaged in the world, and in this anywhere humanity is completely destroyed. The situation, and I want to know what the role of the journalist. They have to play the formation of public opinion and consciousness of on behalf of humanity. How come he act his role? Thank you.
Okay, I'm just going to, if you don't mind, I'm just quickly going to summarize that question. And I think it's such an important question, the way you wrote it in the chat, because Isabel, you mentioned two words that stood out for me in your last response: ethics and responsibility. And Nasser, if you don't mind, I'm just going to read the question that you posted in the chat as well. And he says in the chat room, Nasser, you can mute if you are done. We'll give our guest a chance to now respond. But in the chat, Nasser essentially asks or says, any war is harmful to humanity, and there are two sides to war. Each of them claims to be right from their own place, or I guess perspective. And as a journalist, what kind of role can be played in the formation of public opinion and consensus on behalf of humanity? Now, for me, that talks about the role and the responsibility and the ethics of the journalist as well, because there's a conflict, there's many sides to it. You know, Nasser, do you mind muting yourself? You are muted. Okay, thanks. So Isabel, I mean, like, how do you deal with that? You know, like, how do you know, especially in situations where, you know, people already have an opinion on who's right and wrong. But I think as journalists, we still have the responsibility. Well, I know that we still have the responsibility to give the information from every perspective and every side of a conflict. Let's talk a bit about that, you know, especially in a conflict situation. How do you maintain the ethical responsibility, even when you might believe, you know, that one party clearly is the aggressor or one party clearly is wrong, and, you know, the other one is the victim? If I can use those kind of words, how do you maintain that ethical responsibility in a conflict?
I think it's very difficult in this particular conflict for two reasons. One is because you don't have access to the other side. First thing, as a as a journalist who's from a country, like a Western country or a country which is, I mean, most countries I think don't have real relations with Russia at the moment. So that's the first thing. But I suppose, and the second thing is that there is this kind of, well, I mean, there, you know, it's an imperial conflict, and you know, there were territorial boundaries which have been breached, and you can say, Ukrainians, of course, they have made mistakes, but then when you think about it, ultimately, you're like, well, but Russia shouldn't be attacking. So I think it's so. I give an example of the fact that Ukrainian soldiers are often basing themselves in schools. So schools have been empty since the invasion started. There's either been no learning or distance learning. And Ukrainian soldiers are basing themselves in schools because they basically were not prepared for the scale of this invasion. So they didn't have barracks set up for this many soldiers. And what schools and other places like that offer, like kindergartens, is toilets, rooms, kitchens, large kitchens where you can feed a large number of people at once and stuff like that. But often, and the Ukrainian side doesn't declare its losses. So often when a school is hit, the Ukrainian side will tweet, you know, a school is hit and X number of people have died, without saying that they're soldiers. So they won't lie and say that they are, you know, that they were civilians. And some schools have been repurposed for civilian purposes. So that's another aspect. You know, some schools house refugees, some schools are humanitarian centers, but some schools are being used for military purposes as bases. So what I try to do is just present that fact. So I present the facts and I say, and often Russia will say, you know, 300 people died, and it's clear 300 people haven't died. So I just say, you know, there was evidence that Ukrainian military were based at the school. Russia says 300 people have died without presenting evidence. You know, Ukraine has said that X many people have died. You know, at the scene we weren't able to, or you know, we weren't able to say whether they were soldiers or not. I can't remember what I put, but there's been several instances like that where, for instance, a residential building where soldiers were staying, so there were civilians and residents staying in this residential building, and the soldiers were staying there, I think because they were maybe officers and they weren't living in the barracks, which were down the road. And so that building was hit and civilians and soldiers died. And I don't know how many civilians and how many soldiers died. So I put, you know, local residents said soldiers were living there. At least X many civilians died because some civilians were named. It's not clear how many soldiers were killed or injured, you know, or how many were living in the building. So I just try and break it down. That's what I try to do, but it is very that's what I just try to do in every instance, is say, or like, for instance, you know, situations where the Ukrainians have been surrounded and they're firing out to try and keep the Russian side back, and then Russian side are firing back into residential areas, and obviously that is hitting the civilian population in that area. So that's exactly what I say. You know, and I think that's being honest about what's happening on the ground, without having to make a wider judgment about anything. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, so essentially, or one of the big things is also be led by the information and not judgment. Because I think, you know, once we become the opinionated journalists, or the opinion cannot override the fact. I mean, I think that's, for me, an important ethical responsibility of a journalist. At least I just wanted to share that. That's something that's kind of like something that I'm picking up. Is that like a correct takeout from what you've said, Isabel?
Yeah,
Or am I making an assumption?
No, I'd say that's what you just have to do, is you just have to get every situation and say what happened, and what you know and what you don't know, and try not to like make any assumptions about it, essentially. Yeah, but I'd be really interested to hear what Thomas thinks, because I think he has a lot of experience on this side.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Thomas, just because it's a documentary film, does it mean that you've got more creative freedom? I mean, you still have a responsibility. Like you said, you know, one of the first victims of a conflict is the truth, information. Yes. So, you know, talk to us maybe about sort of like that responsibility in documentary film, you know, around ethics and the responsibility of making sure that you reflect all the information, all the sides, and, you know, not just choose the easy road and say, this is the victim and this is an oppressor.
Yes. In many war zones, you have a fluid space. For example, in eastern Ukraine, the common space between Ukraine and Russia is fluid. And the people there have fluid identities. For example, they speak Russian, most of them. The population of Eastern Ukraine are as a main tongue the Russian, the main language they speak Russian, and you have to clear what happens here. When start the war of Ukraine after Russia invasion, I started research about Azov Battalion. You know, Isabel, I tried to learn what is this battalion. I had as sources an important documentary from NBC about Azov Battalion, the report of UN about human rights in Ukraine during 2016, and I tried to learn more things about this battalion, because when the war started, we have a battalion. A part of this is under of formal Ukraine army, but we have information that some members of this battalion have Nazism identities. And I ask myself, and I ask to my audience, a research question. Is the Azov Battalion a Nazism battalion, for example, based on the SS battalion, German Nazism battalions during the Second War? My answer was negative. Azov Battalion is a battalion out of the state of Ukraine during the first step, but after a long period, Azov Battalion, the members, the army axis of Azov Battalion is under of Ukraine state, and in any case, Azov Battalion is not a Nazism battalion. When I finished this radio documentary for public radio, I accepted a formal attack from the government that I took the side of Russia. I used the Russian information in my radio documentary, but never I used Russian information. All my documentary based on West media. For example, NBS, it's a US TV channel. I don't think that UN is a structure of Russia, and the report of UN is accepted from all countries in the world. I am a victim from the harassment and the war information about Ukraine war, because as an investigative journalist and as a filmmaker, I would like to learn what is behind of the war, behind of the war front line. For example, I'm not correspondent as Isobel. I'm interested to learn when the dust of the war is down, what happens here? What happened all of this time in Ukraine? Which the role, for example, of Azov Battalion during the war? You know, Isobel, that Azov Battalion have made crimes against people, for example, trans people, or women, or our colleagues in TV channels. I would like to learn what the main role of Azov Battalion or another battalion during the war in Ukraine after the war finished, and I wish to finish very, very quickly.
Well, Thomas, I'm sure Isabel will still be in Ukraine. If you go there, I'm sure you could connect with her. Isabel, you might be working on a film project soon. I just want to go to our participants. Lots of questions coming in, and this is awesome because we really want you to use this time with our guests, you know. Let's go to our chat. Let's look at the questions. I'm going to take the questions as they have come in. I'm going to ask you to please introduce yourself and where you are calling or where you're phoning in from, because I think that's the strength also of our participants. They really are from around the world. So let's first go to Rachel. Rachel Duarte, you can unmute yourself, tell us where you're from, and then you can ask your question.
Hello, my name is Rachel Duarte. I'm from Nairobi, Kenya. And I just wanted to ask, Thomas just mentioned that, you know, he was in this country and he felt that he saw a certain boy running away from an aeroplane, which I thought was really, really, you know, traumatic. And how does he manage to deal with, you know, his mental health and protect his mental health when filming this, you know, traumatic experiences that are happening? And I also think the question can also be answered by Isabel.
Thank you. That is a very important question. Let's go to Thomas and Isabel.
Yes, thank you very, very much. And good afternoon to Nairobi from Athens. Yes, it's a very good question, because I'm living with these people for a long time, and I have relationships with these people. And after the filming, believe me, all time I'm carrying this pain, and after the end of the film, it's not easy to keep a distance between me, between camera and my object. I can't feel differently. I'm interested very much for the human pain, and I'm hearing very carefully the testimonies of people. I have to understand their pain. And finally, I'm carrying this pain, and after the filming, it's traumatic for me, but I can't manage it. I am 55 years old, and I'm feeling, I'm feeling now with the same way when I was 20 and I was directed my first film. No, I can't manage the human pain.
Yeah, the impact of the work that we do is very real. And I'm going to share something as well, but let's first hear from Isabel.
Yeah, I mean, I sympathize. Obviously, I think Thomas has been doing it for a lot longer. So I can only imagine, but I definitely sympathize with Thomas. I think it's very difficult. I mean, I find like there was like one day where things were really bad when I found out what was happening in Mariupol when people started to first evacuate. It was in mid-March. And I realized that, it's a city of 450,000 people, and they were drinking water from radiators, and they had no food. And if there wasn't something done quickly, a lot of people were going to starve to death, and a lot of people did. And I remember I just had to, lie down. I just had to calm down, because you can get overstressed. And I think you have to find some tactics to deal with the stress of that kind of desperation. But I do think definitely there are tools available online. There are people that you can speak to, but I think ultimately it's going to take a toll. And I'm sure Thomas can talk more about this than I can, but like, I think, the fact that he says it has the same effect on him now as it did when he made his first film just shows you that it doesn't, you don't get used to it. So yeah.
So thank you to Thomas and Isabel. I'm going to share very briefly just 2 experiences that I've had, and I want to encourage anybody, go and seek mental health services if you need this, because I do not think that we can do our jobs if we do not take care of ourselves. And this goes for any profession, right? Whether you're going to be a doctor working in the front line, whether you're going to be a counselor. There are 2 incidents when I saw a psychologist. The first was when I was detained by Israel. I had to go to Hebron in Palestine, and I had to go via Ben Gurion Airport. And I was detained and interrogated for 15 hours at Ben Gurion Airport. And I can honestly share with everybody that was not a good experience. I was blindfolded. I was interrogated. I went through such a bad experience that when I came back, I was angry. And I saw a psychologist, and she told me, she walked me through a process, and she gave me some tools, like psychologists, they can give you very helpful tools to deal with the impact of violence and trauma, And then the second incident was where I spent 4 months doing stories about gender-based violence in my home city, Cape Town in South Africa. And I started feeling depressed because I was listening to all these stories. And it's so unfortunate, but there were so many stories of women who had been abused in marriages and partnerships, relationships, that I became depressed. And I went consciously and I sought out mental health, services. And there is something called secondary trauma, where you can listen to so many negative stories of people, and you can start almost internalizing that pain, and how you feel can be impacted. But you know what the positive outtake is? There are mental health services. So do not work in isolation. Seek out those services. So thank you to Rachel for that question. I'm going to go back to the chat. I just want to look at the next question that we had. Then who was the next person? Let's see.
Israel has his
Yes,
hand up.
Israel's hand is up. I'm just seeing that now. Israel Campos, you can please tell us where you're phoning from and ask your question.
Hello, everyone. My name is Israel. I'm from Angola, but I work as a journalist in the UK. I'm currently in Angola because, as Isabel was talking about, I'm doing fixing because we're going to have elections in August. And I'm doing fixing for many international outlets. And I have a question for Isabel in regards to that, because I've been, doing, finding contacts for the crews that are coming, and I'll be working with them alongside them during the elections. And Angola has a very hostile environment for journalists. So especially during times like elections, journalists get arrested and those sort of things. And I would like to know with Isabel, how do you negotiate with like this very like big news organizations in terms of providing you with the proper security and treatment as a fixer or as someone who's there just producing and trying to help with the international crews? Because I just feel like sometimes they don't give you the value you actually have, and they feel like the fact that you are from the country, you don't deserve to get the same treatment as international journalists. And I'm obviously I want to do the work because they are very like prestigious news organizations, but I want to know, where do you draw the line, and how do you stand up for yourself in that regard? And the second one has to do with them. I feel like we were talking about being factual as journalists, and someone said we should be led by information, not the judgment. But as a journalist that has been telling local stories to international stories, very often I feel the need to not to judge the facts, but to make some judgment just so that the local story can make sense for the people who don't have the same background information as I do. So we do a lot. I do some stories for the BBC, for example. Sometimes I'm asked to do like analysis because someone who is in Lisbon or in France won't have the background info around the local story. So I'm asked to do the judgment to say, okay, this happened, but what might happen after that? What can that lead to? And what could happen tomorrow because this event happened today? So yeah, I also have a question in regards to that. In the judgment, okay, we do information, we tell facts, but where do we draw the line with the having to judge, especially when we're talking to international audiences? Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Isabel, I think I'll take the second question if you don't mind taking the first one, because that's exactly what you were talking about earlier.
Yeah, Israel, thanks so much for that question. I think it's really important. I think, honestly, if I could have laws about fixing, I would have them, because I just think some of the relationships can be absolutely abusive and wrong. Some of them can meet you at a halfway point where you're getting some experience, but you're not quite being treated as you want to be. And then some of them will be positive, right? But tends more to be kind of okay to negative, unfortunately. So I would say in terms of security, so if they're like a big news organization email, so what you need to do is you need to draft out an email and you need to lay out what are the dangers for journalists in the country, for you, and what you phrase it in terms of, I'm concerned about this, and then it's on email, and they cannot their company rules will they cannot ignore that, right? So that's what I would definitely do to start with. And you can have like a pre-conversation before that with them, so it doesn't come kind of out of the blue and seem too kind of, but you need to lay it out so that they can't then later say, oh, we didn't know, or whatever it is. So I think that's like, first of all, very important. And in terms of sort of building those contacts up to then push forward with it, I mean, sometimes it's about the personal relationship with whoever you're working for. Like, you can get on and then it can lead to other things. Other times that's not there. But what I would say is, I think you need to really be showing your, voicing and articulating your skills all the time, so So, you know, I can do this, I've done this, and like, and kind of like name dropping in conversation, but for yourself, like self-promoting for yourself, so that they take you super seriously and super professionally. And that will really help to like push your profile forward. If, you know, they, of course they need you, because they wouldn't be hiring you if they didn't need you, right? But they need to be reminded of that, and to be reminded of the fact that they don't have those, you know, skills. So just for example, I would say like, you know, doing a really good job, but also I think this analysis point, which I think will come on to the second question, but I think offering that content, offering that stuff which they don't know, offering them interesting things, will show them that they need you. And I would say stuff like, you said you're kind of like part based in the UK or mostly based in the UK. I would say, you know, I'm based in the UK, I'm really looking for opportunities, like please let me know, like and once you finish working with them, like follow up with your CV, follow up with your work, like what you want to do, and just be really like positive, confident. But when it comes to like the safety and security bit, you have to be like, outline it, put it in writing, have those conversations, because sometimes they might not know. Sometimes if you get like a person who's not the best character, maybe they'll choose to ignore some bit just to get the story, and that's not good, because nothing's worth that. Especially if you're from that country, you've got family and stuff, like you need to make sure that you keep you operate between certain the parameters which you're given. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. So Israel, I just want to say that, you know, very practically, just to add on to what Isabella has said, I think what's very important, you know, is that we should not undermine ourselves and the skills and what we bring to the international or the visiting journalists, right? So just because you are in a developing country earning less locally, it doesn't mean that you cannot be paid an international fee for the work that you do. So you can do the research, you can find out what are the rates, and it also depends on your experience, right? I mean, if you have no experience and you have no information, unfortunately, of course, you can't just come in and charge a big fee. So I think do a bit of research and find out how much people are getting paid to do the work as a fixer, or, you know, as you mentioned some of that, right? So I think the research on what to get paid is important. Now, coming to your second question, I think that there is a very important distinction between what is journalism and what is reporting, you know, when we get the facts, and what is editorial. And that is where you talked about your opinion or analysis. And there's space for that. It's not to say that we can never share our opinion, but we need to be very clear when it's an opinion piece or an editorial piece, or when it's us speaking as, let's say, a Ukrainian or an Angolan or a Greek national who's got a very strong opinion on something, you know? So there's space for that.
Can I make a comment?
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah.
Okay, Israel, I would like to say that I just checked in the list of Reporters Without Borders. Angola, it has 99 position in the world list of Reporters Without Borders, and Greece, about press freedom, has the position 108. Angola has better position about press freedom issues than Greece.
Okay, thank you, Thomas. It seems like the Greek journalists have quite a bit of work to do there.
We are in a European country, and we have 108 position, 9 positions under of Angola.
Thank you for sharing that, Thomas. So let's go back to the chat. let's just make sure that we use our time to answer all the questions of participants. I also see that Mercy has a question. Mercy, do you want to unmute yourself, introduce yourself, where you're from, and then you can ask the question.
Hi, my name is Mercy from Kenya. Good evening here. You guarantee your security when reporting from a war zone area, because for one, you can be shot, you can many things can happen to you. So how do you guarantee your security?
Thank you for that question. And I think the bigger question is there even any guarantee? Isabel, I think you should go first.
So I think every war zone is really different depending on what kind of weapons you use. And some countries where there is no war happening can be incredibly dangerous for journalists, like what Israel was saying, or about how journalists can be attacked or repressed. So I think it's just about knowing. So in Ukraine's case, I just know, okay, well, I know how far artillery can reach and where artillery is being used. And I know that artillery is really inaccurate. So if I'm in a town where artillery is being used, I just try and go really quickly in and out. With rockets, it's more random, but if you're going to be in a military base, that's obviously a target. So you don't want to be spending a long time in a military base. But I think you just have to just keep your wits, and just be risk averse, don't take risks. I think in some ways it's because I think the press, obviously there's the wartime issue, but the press is relatively free in Ukraine. It didn't used to be like that when I was younger. My dad was a journalist in Ukraine, and people used to be murdered and people used to be beaten up all the time on orders from the president's office, right? We're talking 20 years ago now. And in a way, like the fact that you had this really, really violent authoritarian relationship with the state and with the authorities was kind of more scary to operate in, because everywhere you were going, you could be watched, you could be followed, you could be intimidated. And that's in a way much a kind of more difficult environment to operate in some ways, like because I feel like here they're just plus minus, you ring the press secretary, you ring the ministry, you talk to them. I mean, they might of course there's going to be issues. I'm not trying to say that there aren't issues, but I definitely don't get any feeling that they want to harm me. So I think you can't guarantee your security, but I think you can understand what the risks are in whatever country that you're in, and try and tell the truth. But I think it's each to their own. There are people who will be very, very vocal, or you can do something on a smaller scale, and perhaps it gives you less risk. I don't know quite how to sort of quantify that, but for instance, if you were to report on something where you're going to get backlash from the authorities, I guess if you make sure that either you don't byline it, so you didn't put your name to it, or you do it with several other people, being in a group, you make sure that it becomes big news, so that you have the protection of a bigger news organization or whatever it is. Like those kind of tactics can help, but I think places like Reporters Without Borders would be much better at advising stuff like that. I know now, for instance, in Russia, most reporters have left, and those people who have remained published without their name now, so that they can't be traced. So that's if that helps at all.
I think what I really like about what you said is know your territory, know where you're going in. So for example, if there's actual shooting, understand that you need to stay alive to tell the story. So prepare, know your environment, know where you are working, And secondly, also like understand the risks of the work that you're doing. So like Isabel was saying, sometimes it's better to publish your story without your name. You want to get the story out, but you don't also want to be targeted, right? We only have about 5 minutes, I think, or even, oh no, we have 8 minutes. Okay, cool, awesome. So Mehmet, you have a question as well?
Yes, thank you so much, Yazid. My question is to Isabel and Thomas. We know that news or reporting from war zones and conflict zones can be used as an evidence for accountability or combating human rights violations or crimes against humanity. So like when you are reporting, do you take this into account in your reporting, or have any of the authorities reach out to you for more information about the issues you are addressing? And also maybe as a second question, like, have you encountered any life-threatening situation while reporting, and how did you overcome the situation? If the answer is yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mehmet. Yes, I need time to clear the information from official sources. I can't clear this information during the filming. Many times I'm filming opposite testimonies, and I wish to find testimonies for the same thing from opposite sides. I need time to find what happens here. I can't find in that time because I'm not a correspondent, a war correspondent, to show in my audience what happens in real time. We have victims, we have injuries, we have bombing. I'm not interesting for all of it. I'm find under of the dust of war for stories, for human stories. I'm interesting to say to say stories about war, unique stories, not stories you can find in a news agency, or for example, you can read in Guardian. For example, I have a close. I know a writer. He has written books in Russian. He lives in Kiev. He's an famous Ukrainian writer, and my next project will be a trip with this writer in Ukraine, and I would like from him to tell his story, to tell his childhood in eastern Ukraine. His village does not exist now after bombing, after Russian bombs. But I'm interested from this writer to make his memory again after the war finished. I can't explain exactly, but I would like a story from this Ukrainian writer after the war. The writer returned to the birthday city. The birthday city does not exist because the war destroyed after everything is destroyed after the war, and this writer could be make again his memory, his birthday city in his memory. I'm interesting for different stories in the world, human stories, but not. I'm not selling news. I'm making documentaries for the pain of humans, and it's my main idea about my filming work.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Thomas. So, Isabel, I think it would be good to hear from a journalist as well, because often it's said that journalism is what the first edition of history or the first record. And I mean, what you write and publish on the internet is going to be there, you know, likely for a long time, and people will have access to the information that you've produced. So, I mean, I don't know. It's a very interesting question that Mehmet asks. Has your work been used as a legal reference before? But even if not yet, in future it could be, right? And what does it say about our responsibility to get our facts right?
So it has already, and I think I'm not the only journalist. I think there's been a massive influx of NGOs and legal NGOs and different prosecutors and lots of international interest in prosecuting war crimes in Ukraine. So I think that's why, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there's a big responsibility. It can actually be damaging sometimes when the journalist is the first person to speak to a victim instead of, you know, I mean, it depends what the situation. Ukraine's an unusual place where there's a conflict happening, but the national institutions are still working, right? So, so you don't want to sort of damage people's testimonies by having them talk to you and present, you know, there's a certain way that investigators take testimony, which isn't this. A journalist should do it similarly, but it's not going to be the same. So yeah, so I would say that yes, it's happened. And yes, it's a huge responsibility, and it's also a responsibility in terms of re-traumatizing victims, which is something we talked about last time. But yeah, that's what I would say.
Thanks, Isabel. We are out of time, but I think I just want to acknowledge one last question or comment. It's from Olanshile. Olanshile, just want to unmute and tell us where you're phoning from, and then maybe just tell us what you've shared in the chat. Olanshile, are you still with us? Okay, not sure. So participants, thank you for joining us again for our third session. This has been quite a heavy session, I will admit, even for myself, hearing about the work of conflict reporting. Go take a walk after this if you need to, take care of yourself, do some breathing exercises, you know. If you need to take a nap, do that too. Whatever you need to do to regulate, to get back to your optimal self, as we say, you know, take care of yourself. We've heard from the people who are in the field doing the work. Cemre, do you want to do the final, you know, wrapping up things, or Mehmet?
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, Yazid. Thank you so much. And I do agree with you. It was indeed an intense session. And thank you so much to Thomas and Isabel. And just very brief note, Thomas has shared with me a analysis paper that I will share with the participants. And I just want to turn to Mehmet very quickly as he will share our one of our platforms, and then he can wrap it up. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Cemre. I would like to share, our website for these webinars, and these webinars is are recorded and also with some summaries and some highlights and videos and resources. It will be published on this website. So it is the jwfacademy.org, and if you go, on this website, you will see that these are the upcoming webinars. So we have had already the first, second, and today the third session. And so when you click on any of these, hopefully next week, you will be able to see the video recording of today's webinar over here. And you can always come back, listen to it, watch it, or you can also recommend some other journalism students or other journalists to come back and to watch this. And at the same time, not only the video, but we will also put some of the resources that our speakers have already shared with us. Other than that, I would just like to remind you, for those who are interested in writing a journalism article, so we would appreciate if you could inform Cemre and me if you are interested in this. So your article will be published on our website, not only this site, the JWF Academy, but also the jwf.org, so our website as well. And lastly, let me see, okay. So if you go to the events on this website, you not only have the webinars for 2020, but you also have other, okay, if you go to courses, I'm sorry, and then if you go to courses, you have the webinars for 2022, but you also have the webinars for 2021. So over here, we have different topics. For example, erosion of financial support for journalism, citizen journalism, freedom to access information, the role of digital media in society. So if you go to any of these, let's say I'll just click on one of them. So as you can see over here, we have the topic and the subtopics, but at the same time, as you see, we have the recorded video that you can watch and you can learn more about this topic if this is something that is interesting to you. And as I told you before, we have the learning resources if you would like to learn more about this topic. So these are some of the news articles or some of the other resources that can be helpful to you as well. So this is what I wanted to share with you. And just for the next week, we will have two prominent organizations who will be with us, and these are Thomson Reuters Foundation and Foreign Press Association. So we will have the CEO of Thomson Reuters Foundation with us, and he's Antonio Zapula, and he will be talking about the programs and resources available with Thomson Reuters Foundation. And I remember that what are some of the safeguards for journalists if you encounter any legal cases against your reporting, and they have the trust law program and project that can be very helpful. So this is going to be happening on Monday, August 1st. And then the next day on Wednesday, we will have Foreign Press Association's president, Mr. Ian Williams. And also we will have a UN correspondent from New York, Stephanie Phelan. So next week will be very, productive and very fruitful discussions. So we would like to see you next week. Thank you so much. Cemre, I don't know if you have any final words.
No, thank you. We will be sending out reminders for Monday and Wednesday, and hope to see everyone next week too.
Mm-hmm. Enjoy the weekend, everybody. And
Thank you.
yeah, bye,
Thank
everybody.
you, Yazid. Thanks. Bye-bye.